Takata, the company at the heart of one of the worst auto safety scandals in history, has filed for bankruptcy. Japan's Takata was brought down by the huge cost of his exploding airbag crisis. The company's faulty airbag inflators, which can blast shrapnel into drivers and passengers, have resulted in tens of millions of vehicles being recalled and linked to 11 deaths in the U.S. and several others elsewhere. Is bankruptcy, and we talk about bankruptcy frequently on this show. Some people have said that Atlantic City, the city where we broadcast from, should file for bankruptcy, the city itself. But in terms of Takata, that company and other companies, is bankruptcy ever a good strategy to save a business?
In looking at Takata, okay, we have another issue to briefly consider. Look, the people who are responsible for this scandal, they need to be punished accordingly. Period. If there was intent, if there was fraud involved with this, they knew that there were faulty airbags and so on, and allowed it to go forward. Well, that's criminal. That has to be dealt with. Now let's flip this to the other issue, and to your question is bankruptcy a good strategy? And the answer is that it could be. There's 5 different types of bankruptcy outlined in the U.S. Bankruptcy Code, and they're identified by chapters, and we've heard those chapter numbers being thrown around like it's a chapter 7, it's a chapter 11, but the real heart of bankruptcy is really allowing an entity or a person to get rid of their debts. That's so that certain debts do not last forever, because it becomes a hole is dug so deep that you could never get out of it. So from the standpoint of, a business using bankruptcy as a strategy to recover or to get rid of its debts or to get a fresh start, yeah, it is a good strategy. So let's specifically look at, the 2 chapters that get thrown around quite often. There's Chapter 7, Chapter 11, just in general terms so that we all understand what we're talking about here. So Chapter 7 is basically a liquidation of all assets. That's basically game over. There's no hope of recovery. So all the assets are sold, whatever they're sold for, whatever funds you get, the debts are paid off. Everything is done. And I know that's an oversimplification, but it's a basic concept that you ultimately shut down the business and you get to walk away, in theory, from the debts that have been accumulated. Now, in the Takata situation, in terms of a filing for bankruptcy, Chapter 11, that's what we're talking about. That's what applies to commercial enterprises predominantly, and that's all about a reorganization. So what happens is the business develops a plan to pay off or reduce certain debts with the discharging of other debts as part of a plan to return the entity to profitability. So it's about saying, look, this is a viable business if we can get relief in these areas. And if we can do that, then the business can continue. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Bad thing for creditors, right? Because they're not getting full payment. They're getting something, but it saves jobs because the business can recover and hopefully ultimately be able to pay all their vendors in the future and certainly keep people employed.